Hello, guys. Okay, hi. I know I'm semi in a different location. However, today I've just been trying to do a million things at once. And you might think, well, if you've been trying to do a million things at once, if you're watching this video, why not be in your bed? But I just wanted to change things up, and also I'm wearing makeup as well, so I kind of felt like it didn't really suit being in bed. You know what I mean? If I'm in bed, I'm unwinding sort of vibes. But anyways, I really hope that background noise is not in there. God, let's catch up. It's been a bit of a, I don't know, I feel like, okay, now we're in April, but I feel like March has been a bit of a how do I even describe it? I don't know. Well, first of all, I think it was Mercury retrograde, and I felt like the month of March for me was kind of like all these different pieces in my life being moved around in some sense. And even revisiting old things that you kind of thought that you healed from, but it opening back up in a sense. So that was something that was really interesting. But I kind of feel like I was semi going through it March. I'm kind of grateful that it's over in some sense, hopefully, touch wood. But I don't know, I just felt very a little bit displaced, and also yeah, just I don't know, just weird vibes. And I feel like from most people that I've spoken to, a lot of people have also kind of felt like March was a bit of a clunky sort of time. And now we're in April. I hear that apparently the April is when the year starts. I feel like every month I'm like, this is when this month starts. When you have not that I had a bad month, but I think that I just felt very emotional, and I think that I just kind of had to reflect on situations or things that I didn't necessarily want to revisit. But I guess the universe was saying to me that maybe in order to move forward, you kind of need to revisit old things I don't even know. But anyways, March was weird, and I feel like my energy levels was really, really low, and it was just feeling like an effort to do things. But then again, I feel like as someone who I think has a lot of different interests and a lot of different things that I'm into, that yes, it's I've got a lot of things that I'm passionate about. However, the day-to-day things, and even sometimes running, this podcast and being consistent, the day-to-day things of just keeping the wheels going, it's not it just comes naturally, that you just sometimes just get out of bed and you're like, oh my God, I just want to edit this podcast, or I want to, you know what I mean? I think I enjoy more the doing, but then the actual thing of getting yourself to the doing sometimes is really hard. But anyways, April is here. I feel like we're on the up. Not that I was on the down, but I just was very much so in my feels. And it's interesting when I think about myself that I am someone who is emotional. However, I don't know if I do a great job of, say, if I feel sad or displaced. You know what I mean? I feel very uncomfortable when I am in the actual, in between emotion of not feeling the best, that I think sometimes I don't necessarily hold space for myself to tell myself it's all right if you don't feel like your best. It's all right if you're a little bit emotional. Also, sorry for my voice. I literally was sick at the beginning of the week, and then the apartment that I stay at when I'm in Sydney, the electricity was out for the week. Can you believe that? That's why I literally just felt one thing after the other, and I was like, okay, I feel like I'm being taught lessons at the moment, or things to come out of. But I was I don't know if I see the positive, and if anything, I just was like, anyways, this is not what I'm going to talk about. But however, I feel like for the solo episodes, I just always want to jump in with like, hey, what's been happening? How you been feeling? You know, what's going on in your world? What comes up? Blah, 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 blah. I thought today I would talk about how I got into modeling, which feels a little bit self-indulgent. However, over the years, I've always gotten so many questions, and, you know, people have like DM'd me, and I was a little bit like, oh, like, would people even be interested in this? But I guess it's like a semi like different kind of journey compared to like a lot of girls get scouted. But let's start from the beginning, and let me have a sip of this tea to hopefully soothe my voice. Okay, so I feel like I've already said this, but growing up, in some ways, obviously my family raised me, but I also kind of feel like pop culture raised me. MTV, what was it, V channel on Foxtel or something like that. FTV was like the holy grail for me. I loved FTV. Like, I still have FTV going on, but it was basically like fashion TV. And I think for me, coming to Oz at such a young age, and at times, I've said this so many times, but just like feeling displaced and not like not very like seen, or even really knowing like where my place was, that I think that I spent a lot of time in my head, in my imagination, and like watching like pop culture, like not shows, but TV shows like MTV, FTV, blah blah blah, which was like the arts, creative. It really just, I guess it gave me hope. It gave me hope for just like a different kind of reality, you know, not that my reality was like a bad one, but I think that a lot of the times, maybe if like you don't fully, if you're still coming into yourself, you don't quite know where you sit, that sometimes it's easier to just kind of like go off into your imagination and think about this alternate world that you live in, where, you know, everyone's like, oh my god, like, who is that? And very much so, my introduction to modeling, I hate to say this, but my introduction into modeling was Next Top Model. And I know that nowadays there's so much controversy around the show, but I loved that show, and I still love that show. Don't cancel me, but I haven't gone back in, you know, many years to like actually watch it. That definitely, I'm sure that there was like, that there was a lot of like really messed up things that happened on that show. However, I also think that it was just a product of its times, you know, like sure, people can, you know, talk about Tyra Banks, but it's interesting because it's now kind of come out that people have been like analyzing the show a lot more. But kind of what I took from Next Top Model when I watched it growing up was the fact that it felt like modeling was this world that accepted girls who, sure, that there were like people who were like so drop dead gorgeous, but for the most part it was this world that accepted girls who didn't have to be this like cookie cutter look of what was deemed beautiful. And I guess as well, me growing up in a very white environment and watching American TV and seeing more people of color and girls who looked like myself, and Tyra, even I loved Tyra, and I also still love Tyra. Like, I remember watching the Tyra show when she had her own like talk show, and Next Top Model, and she would talk about like being in the 90s and being a black model and having like, you know, sample size and all of that. So anyways, long story short, Next Top Model and FTV, they were my holy grail, you know. Like, I'd come home. Actually, I think I would like pre-record Next Top Model, and I viewed these girls and women as just like just so badass and just so confident. And I think I just was always fascinated by the idea of, a character, like putting on a character, being in a space and say for that short amount of period that you could, be whoever you wanted to be, or you could help a designer bring their vision to life. So I naturally think that I've always been a very creative person, but I feel like being able to watch, these things enabled me to, I guess, open up my horizon and like reality of what was possible. And in some ways I don't know if I hadn't grown up watching those shows, if I would have like pursued modeling. And so then when I was in high school, I did a lot of like theater and acting, and that was like very much so always what I wanted to do, and still to this day still want to do acting. And then when I got into, I think like back then first it was like the Dolly girlfriend model search, which when I tell you that I tried out for all of those things, I did. And I was never successful. I was never. I laugh now, but I was never successful. And it's interesting because I don't necessarily know, when I think about myself, and in terms of like not like tooting my own horn, but I don't quite know why I was just like so resilient when it came to like go, like even from a very young age of being like 16, 17, I like lined up to do basically Dolly and Girlfriend are like two big like teenage magazines in Australia, and they every year, I don't think they do it anymore, but they used to do a model search, and basically, I don't know, I think you just applied online. No. You would go in person basically, and there would be like hundreds of girls lining up to like, walk for these judges and stuff. And I did multiple Dolly girlfriend like model searches, or attended, and never got in. But I remember though, like whenever I would stand in line, I always loved that and talking to the girls and stuff. And I know, and there's this one girl who I'm like still loosely in touch with, who I met just like standing up or like doing the like girlfriend model search and stuff. So anyways, that was unsuccessful for me. I also attempted to audition for Next Top Model in Australia. However, I was like literally like probably a centimeter off the height requirement. Like I just missed it. And I remember one of my best friends at the time, we were in high school, and oh, bless her, like I love her so much, and she went with me to this like Next Top Model. I feel like that would have been my ultimate dream, because I was like a Next Top Model fiend. Like I watched the American one, Australian one. Like if it had Next Top Model in the title, I watched it. Like I was there. Like you know what I mean? And I remember going for the Next Top Model search, and it was in the city, and they would go to like different states and stuff, and I was too short, even though I'm actually not even like short, but in terms of the modeling world, but we'll get into that later. I missed the mark. And then afterwards, my friend and I went to this place in Brisbane called Pancake Manor, and we just went and had pancakes. And I just remember it actually ended up being this like a really sweet day. And I think I've always been really lucky with having friends who have always been like very supportive in whatever pursuits that I've had. And yeah, that was just like a prime example. So anyways, I think by the end of high school, I kind of had already tried doing all these different like magazines and Next Top Model, and obviously failed. Well, I didn't fail. Well, I guess I failed. Yeah. So then I kind of had a moment where I was kind of a bit like, I think I just was a bit like, oh, okay, maybe like this isn't like meant to be. Then I ended up, what did I do? Oh yeah, and then I went to uni, and when I was at uni, there was this girl in like one of my business classes or something like that, and I remember that I thought she was like literally the most stunning person ever. And then she said to me, she was like, I think, and we were in like a group like assignment thing together or something like that. And I remember her saying to me like, oh my God, like you're so stunning. She was like, I would love to shoot you one day. And I was like, I kind of was just a bit like, oh, like, okay, like sure. Actually, you know what? Before that happened, when I got out of uni, there was a girl that I was like loose friends with in high school. And she, at the time was studying at this fashion college, and she needed like a model. And I remember she asked me, and I was like super keen. I was like, yeah, sure. And I just went in, and she did the styling, and then they had someone like doing our makeup. And I remember that I had obviously watched so many shows about this and had like seen other girls do it, but being in that environment and seeing everything come together, from like talking to the stylist, the photographer, the makeup artist, I just remember feeling this like deep intrigue. And I think just being on set, that in some ways I feel like the movement aspect of modeling kind of came naturally to me. That I've definitely learned a lot of things over the years, and but I just feel like that natural instinct to move came naturally to me, and I don't know, can't explain it. Anyway, so that I had that interaction. Then I was at uni, and then I meet this girl, and she's basically like, oh my God, like you're so beautiful. And I was like, what the hell? You think I'm beautiful? Like, she was literally so stunning, and she had like this buzz cut, and I feel like anyone who pulls off a buzz cut, I'm just like you're drop dead gorgeous. Anyways, and then she did a shoot with me just at her place, and she did these like portraits and stuff, and they were like in black and white, and she like edited it like really like intensely. And I remember that was like probably one of the first images that I received where I was like, oh my God, like this looks not like it didn't look like me, but because I was putting on this character and in this mood and intention that she had for the shoot. So obviously it wasn't like what I am usually like. Why did I just shout just then? I was like, but I really loved it, and I posted it on social media. And then that summer, I came to Sydney, and I was doing an internship at Harper's Bazaar, which I think I've like briefly spoken about. And I was interning at Harper's, and I was working in their fashion cupboard, which basically you help whenever they have a shoot, you're the one who will like document all the clothes that they receive, and make sure that everything is like returned and stuff, and just make sure that you don't lose anything. And I was doing that over the summer, and I'd come from Brisbane, and I was in Sydney for about 3 months doing that. And I spent a lot of time that summer by myself, just because I didn't know anyone and stuff. And when I was interning at Harper's, I remember that I was kind of like, okay, sure, I'm into fashion, but I kind of knew that styling wasn't really what I was like into. If anything, whenever the models would come in, I'd be like, ooh, like who's that? And, I'd be like more intrigued by that. I didn't stay on long enough to work on actual shoots. Like I was more just like in the office, like doing more the back end things. But because I had so much time, I was like, you know what? I'm in Sydney, which is like one of the which is basically like the fashion capital, I would say, of Australia. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go and just put out my resume, but I was like, I'll just go and like chat to agencies and stuff. And I think that summer I would have gone to because I think I would split it up and do every weekend or every so often. I would look up and see if there was any walk-ins and blah, 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 blah. I don't even know. I probably went to like 20 agencies. I kid you not. I think any agency that I found, not any, but if there was an agency that I resonated with, I would go and just put myself out there. And everyone said no. Everyone said no. So, But also it was a very different time. Like when I was doing this, it was more like 2015, 2016. It was kind of like the summer cusp of 2015, 2016. And I just think in terms of beauty ideas in Australia, it was very white at the time. And that was the time that I would go to agencies. And I'm Liberian, West African representation. And people would say to me when I would go to these agencies, they would be like, oh my God, we love your look. You obviously have a really great look, but we already have someone who looks like you. And then I don't even know what I would say. I'd be like, okay, cool. And then I would go onto their site and be like, oh, what other black girls do they represent? And there'll probably be like one or two black girls who probably looked nothing like me, who were probably like mixed race or had a different hair texture. And it was interesting because I felt this internal thing within me where I was like, no, this feels like what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, or I just felt like I was supposed to do something that was creative. I was supposed to do, I can't explain it, but energetically, I just felt it. And anyways, it was just it was just like years and years, not years and years, but like quite a few years of just like, no, like, wait, let me think about it. How, like, yeah, like I feel like 5 years of me just like trying to like enter the industry. So anyways, I digress. After I finished that internship, I then went to Milan on student exchange, which was literally, I feel like I need to do an episode about my exchange experience and studying in Milan and all of that. But that changed my life. It was the first time, like I obviously did the 3-month internship in Sydney and was like by myself. But being in Milan, that was like really my like push of like, you know, I feel like that experience in Milan has influenced who I am, because it was like exposure to just like European fashion, exposure to like different people of like all walks of life. And also I think I was away for about 8 months, studying for about 6 months. I really like just realized how much I loved meeting people from all walks of life, different cultures. And I think that really inspired within me this thing of like, oh, like I really love talking to people. And I guess because you're so young, you know, and you're like kind of trying to figure out what your voice is or how you view the world and your perspectives and stuff, and having that period to just like travel and like meet people from all walks of life. So anyways, I then like kind of left Sydney and was like, okay, when I left Sydney and I went to Milan, whilst I was in Milan, I've said this before, but I just feel like me as like a 20-year-old, like a freshly 20-year-old, had just so much confidence. I think at that moment, I was unsure if I would really get into modeling, because I had like gone to literally like 20 agencies, every like model competition that was like around my age group, and just wasn't really getting anywhere. But I knew that I really loved it. I knew that I had a lot of fun with it, and it was a way for me to express myself and also just like get out of my shell. So whilst I was like studying in Milan, I literally just like hit up people who were photographers, and I think as well that was kind of like this beginning of like social media really ramping up. And I don't really think I would fully have my career now if it wasn't for social media. I think like most of the time, most girls get into modeling because they're scouted. It's like they're walking and someone goes, oh my God, like you have an amazing look. And then the agency gets in touch with them. Whereas I feel like with me, I went knocking at the doors because I was like, this is something that I'm like interested in. But it just also meant that at that time that it was kind of like my look and my beauty wasn't fully seen or accepted within, you know, the Western world sort of thing. So I guess there was kind of like a disconnect of me feeling so passionate about this thing and wanting so badly to get into it, but I guess my surroundings just wasn't really matching with my drive and intention. But anyways, when I was in Milan, I then started a blog. Yeah, like an online blog website, and I would write these articles and stuff, and during that period, it was like a huge period when everyone was like blogging and like doing like think pieces and stuff, and at the time I was like studying journalism, so I was like, oh, this is like actually really, really interesting, and I found it more freeing to like actually write about my thoughts and experiences as, you know, someone like growing up and stuff, and kind of like coming of age, and then yeah, that happened. And I remember as well, when I was overseas studying in Milan, I went to like agencies in Milan as well, because I was like, well, if I'm in Europe, I may as well go and like put myself out there. I don't know how many agencies that I went to, but they all said no. So you would think, you would be like, girl, give it up now. You've obviously tried and it's just not working. But I think then I just let go. I just focused on what I was like interested in, which was the aspect of community and bringing people together. So I kind of was like, and I genuinely just loved shooting. I loved shooting with my friends. I loved thinking of concepts and like, you know, and at that time I think I was really in like my creative direction sort of like realm, as you know, life and whatnot. But I just genuinely loved that. And I even remember when I came back to Australia from exchange, I think there was like a moment where I almost signed with an agency that was in Melbourne, and I remember meeting up with this lady and like chatting with her, and I think the biggest thing about me doing modeling has always been my height. And it's interesting because obviously you've got someone like Kate Moss, who was a kind of like a one of a kind sort of thing. Like she's 5'7". I'm like a tiny bit over 5'7", but we're practically the same height. But height has always been a thing in modeling, or I guess more so the sort of jobs that I was wanting to do, which was probably a little bit more like not as commercial. So I guess that was a bit of a hindrance, but also, what are you going to do? Like, this is my height. What am I like? Okay. Like, you know, I can't do anything about it. So then I feel like the turning point for me was probably in 2019. At the time, I was just like had just graduated uni, and I was just like on with the content, like shooting with friends, like posting things, and just like collaborating with people, like not anyone, but you know, people who I met and who wanted to shoot. I was just like, let's create. That was really cool. And then at the time I went on to a reality TV show, which if you know, you know. And then I came off the show, and I then reached out to this agency, which I had previously reached out to, but they hadn't gotten back to me. And I think in some ways, I guess going on that show, it did give me a bit of a platform, but I don't necessarily know if it was like in terms of like modeling, because when I came off the show, I'd probably say for about 6 months or something like that. Yeah, for quite a long time, 6-7 months, nothing really happened. And I remember that was such a weird period in my life. But yeah, in 2019, I just reached out to this agency that I had been really trying to get in also on their books. And they finally took a meeting with me. But it also kind of took about, I would say 6-7 months for me to actually start working. And I personally feel the thing that changed my modeling career within Australia was the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't think that I would have become a full-time model with who I am if it hadn't been for those conversations that were being had in 2020. I honestly feel like that was the biggest thing that like changed the trajectory for me. And it was just like an extremely exciting time, because I'd obviously for so many years worked so hard and put myself out there. I probably got, honestly, I feel like I got like 100 no's from like agencies, from like, you know, from in Sydney, from in Melbourne, from in overseas. Like, it was like, I honestly feel like it would have been 100 no's. And then even when I did end up getting an agency, for me, for my story, it wasn't immediately. It was the fact that people were talking about race and inclusivity and what that even looked like. And I think it was also an interesting time, because I definitely knew that at times there were brands hiring me or getting me on board, not necessarily because maybe they fully believed in me as a model, but definitely to tick a box. So it obviously creates a weird thing internally that you obviously clock that. But then also in saying that, I kind of, like, my aunt would always be like, I think you just need to go put your best foot forward. And even at the time, I had a really good friend who is a makeup artist, and she would say that I think this period for you is just about creating these relationships. And obviously we know that things are going to change in terms of like people are probably going to regress. This topic is not really going to be on people's minds as much. However, I think your biggest thing is just hoping that the relationships that you've forged can then be carried on to when say the topic of like race and inclusivity is not on everyone's minds. And I guess since like 2020, which was probably when I started full-time modeling, I feel like my journey and stuff has like ebbed and flowed, and then I ended up working more in Sydney, and even like the relationship of like trying to find an agency that is going to evolve with you is also a whole other thing. I'm going to move this backwards. Is also a whole other thing, because when I was in Brisbane, I kind of had felt like I loved the clients that I worked with, but I also just wanted to challenge myself. That I think that I was very good at doing like, you know, more like glam looks and kind of being more in that realm. But I guess I'd grown up in an environment, well, not in an environment, I was influenced by models like Naomi Campbell and Tyra Banks, and I had these like hopes of being able to like work overseas, and that has been something that's very interesting, because now we're in 2025 and I've been doing this more or less full time since 2020. And then the influencing and like social media aspect then also came into play. But I feel like I've been very blessed in terms of like my career as a model. I've met so many amazing people, but I'm also at a point at the moment where it feels like it kind of feels like a little bit of letting go also has to happen, because I feel myself, obviously, you know, compared to like 20-year-old to me now, has evolved and changed, and I still have a love for it. However, I think that, you know, everyone within this space, especially now, it feels like everyone is trying to find their own voice or kind of like what's next. And I've had this thing recently where it kind of felt like for the last 2 years, it felt like I was like 2-3 years that I kind of was like changing in terms of like modeling agencies. I had like kind of 2 big changes of like trying to find like a team who understood me or kind of just like saw me and knew that like modeling wasn't the only thing that I was doing, because in some ways I kind of feel like when you don't fit hypothetically that image of what is in that specific time of like the having that look, you need to explore other things, and modeling is a very interesting thing because I feel like 80% of it is outside of your hands. Obviously, it's a special sort of industry in the sense that like you could work so hard, you know, you could be, say, eating really clean and like exercising and like, and obviously your agency can definitely set you up with like making sure that you've got like the right images and how they want to sell you, and maybe not having you work with everyone else, but it's just so unpredictable in terms of like how you're going to be received with clients and and what the like career trajectory is going to be like. Obviously, if say you do fashion week and you go overseas and you get, you know, a big show also, and that's your debut, then obviously the trajectory is is more like on the up. But there's so, you know, it's like this industry is inundated with so many beautiful girls and boys and, you know, with such interesting looks and backgrounds. But I think what I've also come to realize that what is happening politically also really impacts like the jobs that you get and you know, who clients are going to have. So I think I'm at an interesting spot where I've been doing this for some time, and naturally I feel like I want to evolve as a person. And I think it's not necessary, like I'm obviously I still do modeling, but I think that little girl who was like, would watch, say, I don't know, FTV and know all the girls' names by heart and be like, this person, like on FTV, they'll be like Giselle, known for her walk and her legs. Like I fucking knew every single person, and like that was my jam. That I think now I think I really used to hold onto that dream so tightly and be like, that was the be all and end all. Like if I was not on the catwalk, then it felt like I had not made it. And I have not been on the catwalk in that sense of like going overseas. I've only done it on like a smaller scale in terms of Australia Fashion Week. But I don't know. I feel like 2025 is feeling like a year of me really, I don't want to say like figuring out what I'm doing, because I kind of feel like that's always evolving, but kind of trying to somewhat let go of my ideas of who I saw myself as being and what I was supposed to be. I think at this point in time, I've got all these different interests and all these different things that, I don't know, that I'm passionate about and putting my efforts into. I think in the past couple of years, like my relationship to my work and self, and also having a lot of friends within the industry, that at times I felt a bit overwhelmed in terms of like what my place and space is, you know, like where I fit in. I think what I've really just come to realize, the biggest thing is that whatever I do in life, I don't want to be mediocre at it. I want to work with great people, and I want to push myself and feel like I'm having opportunities that I don't know. I know that my 10-year-old self would 100% scream at the things that I've done, but in terms of like, you know, like my height and blah 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 and things that I obviously can't, like, you know, I can't change that. I think I'm at a place where it feels like things are moving. I'm not as like holding on to this dream so tightly. At least I feel like I've had the opportunity to be able to do some really cool things within this realm. But I'm also seeing myself more as a creative and an artist. And yeah, and just kind of like exploring. And acting is also something that I've always loved at such a young age. I think acting came before modeling. And right now it kind of feels like, I don't know, I'm just like, one of my friends said this really good analogy of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what lands. And I don't know yet what is going to land, but all I know is that I want the opportunity to be able to work with people who in my eyes are the greats and talented and whatnot. I don't know if that makes sense, because I have worked with a lot of very talented people, but I guess I put this pressure on myself of like feeling like internally that you've got a lot to give, and I feel like my whole life I've been influenced by things overseas, and being like, okay, if hypothetically that is potentially not my path, I have given this a go, you know, what else is there? So yeah, I feel like I could say a lot more about like modeling and the industry. Let me know if you want me to revisit this topic, but I just thought it'd be interesting to like tell you what my journey to, I guess, working in this space, because I also think there's an aspect of like, you know, people just kind of like see the end result or like snapshots, and you're just kind of like, oh yeah, this person just always did this, but girl, it wasn't like that. Anyways, chat to you next week when my voice is not croaky.